Let's see. All right. I think we've got some families here. We'll hang out a bit, see if we have more folks join us. But I want to be the first to welcome you to join us for our last faculty spotlight. This is our fifth of five faculty spotlight features that we've had thus far. And I know many of you have recently gained admission. You've heard word from us in regular decision, or some of you have joined from an earlier process having been admitted. But as you know, this is a time to get to know our faculty, understand them better, and understand how they make a part of the Reed community, what it is today. So I'm gonna go around and have each of our faculty members introduce themselves. I'm gonna have them introduce who they are, how long they've been here at Reed, what department they represent, but I'm also gonna ask them to talk a little bit about their area of emphasis within their program. And so, Angélica, you are first up.
Okay. So my name is Angélica Osorno. I'm a professor in the Mathematics and Statistics Department. I've been at Reed for 11 years now, which seems like a long time, but maybe not as long as my other two colleagues here. And I do research. So I'm a mathematician within the Math and Stats department, and I do research in something called algebraic topology. So you probably don't know what these words mean, but topology is the study of higher dimensional surfaces. And we use algebra to study them. And what that means is usually not quite the algebra that you learn in high school, but we assign algebraic names to our topological spaces so that we can tell them apart. So the typical joke is that topologists cannot tell the difference between a coffee mug and a donut because all we see is that they have a hole. And so that's not quite what I do for my research, but it gives you an idea.
What do you do for your research?
Well, so one of the things that I do is I try to come up with some of these algebraic invariants, but some more advanced ones that are maybe harder to compute, but easier to distinguish between different topological spaces. And I also do some research with undergraduate students where we do a little bit of combinatorial work. So we count some of these structures in a very hands-on way.
Thank you, Angélica. Anne, how about you?
Yes, hi, my name is Anne Delhanty, and I'm in the French department at Reed, but I also teach in Humanities 110, and I teach in comparative literature as well. I've been at Reed since 2000, so I guess that's 24 years, so Angélica was not wrong. Nigel and I have been here a while. And then I think you wanted to know about what I work on. I work on early modern, French, Spanish, and British prose mainly, sometimes a little bit of theater. And I teach classes around medieval, early modern. I teach language classes. We teach a wide variety of things.
Excellent. Thank you, Anne. How about you, Nigel?
So my name is Nigel Nicholson. I came in 95, so this is my 29th year. I'm in the Department of Greek, Latin, and Ancient Mediterranean Studies. And like Anne, I also teach in Humanities 110, the first year humanities program that that a lot of us team teach together. My research is largely on Greek athletics and the ways in which Greek athletics was made into something valuable, particularly through poems. So it's kind of at the intersection of poetry and sports and politics. And those are sort of at least the three great sort of intellectual loves of my life. And so when I do my research, I spend a lot of time sort of talking about the process through which something like the sort of, sweating and punching of boxing is converted into political capital, right? How does that become something that seems like it's a qualification for running a city?
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So one of the things that I find that students sometimes don't realize is once they get into college, it's not just about their major, but then even within a particular program, there's certain ideas that come up that they really are drawn to. And it's somewhat fascinating that you would have an emphasis within this program. Can you all talk a little bit about how you've seen students come to an area within your field that they feel passionate about, how those conversations are crafted, what they might say when you start to feel that they're really starting to come down on an area of passion or love?
maybe I can get started. So in the mathematics major, we have a very set core set of classes that students take at the beginning, and but we also have students take 4 upper level electives of their choosing. And even at the lower level, you can start seeing that some students maybe are more drawn into algebra or more drawn into analysis, and that tends to increase as it goes up. So there are students who are going to basically take all of their electives in like more algebra kind of things, or maybe all of their electives in more analysis and continuous mathematics kinds of things. And it's very interesting to see it very early on that like students like start having a preference. And then at some point, like especially in these upper level classes, like you might have a project, right? Like where at the end of the semester, in addition to all your homework, you might be asked to like read a paper or to like do some research and go a little bit deeper. And then those kinds of things can really lead to students that's just like going down a rabbit hole where they get so excited about something, and maybe that's something that they want to continue doing during a summer research experience or maybe during thesis. And sometimes it's just like this little things, like maybe a comment that someone makes in class, like the professor makes a comment in class, and then like a student like latches onto that idea and then just like really goes for it. And like, I mean, now like it's so easy to find this information, right? Like you just look up in the internet, like you Google it, and then like all of a sudden like you're actually reading like maybe the original paper where like this ideas came about, all right? And some of our students like really are very independent in like following those ideas, and they come and talk to us and we guide them a little bit, but they just kind of like really go with it. And so I think a lot of that does come up with like little pieces, something that is said in a class, and then like someone else follows it up.
And what I'll just jump in and say for our guests, this is also an opportunity for you to ask any question that you have. There's a Q&A feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And I know you're probably accustomed to all being in the room together. We can see each other, so this format is a bit different. But as you ask questions, I'm going to dismiss your questions, which means that I'm going to try to collate and maybe ask something that many of our faculty can answer based on what you've requested. But they might not stay up long, but feel free to submit those as often, as frequently as you would like. And if you don't get to something, you can always track us down later. Angélica, you mentioned thesis. Can you explain to folks what a senior thesis is at Reed?
Yeah, so every student at Reed writes a thesis. So this is actually a class, and it's a year-long class, but it's a one-on-one experience with a faculty mentor. So at least in the math and stats department, we try to make the student happy, but also the faculty happy when we make assignments of thesis advisors. And between the faculty mentor and the student, they craft a project that it's meant to be a year-long project. And at least in our department, some projects are very much like new research, trying to answer a new question. But sometimes they're more expository research where like a student like maybe really wants to learn deeply some advanced piece of mathematics, so then they just go and read it and make it their own by making sure that they really understand it and then write about it. The thesis culminates in a written project, so like an actual document. But in addition, we have this oral exam at the end, and more than an exam, it's a showcase. It's an opportunity for the student to really show what they've learned through the process of the thesis. And one of the things that I love about Reed is that we actually have 4 faculty members who attend this oral, 2 in the department, 1 in the division. So maybe like in a math thesis, you might have a computer scientist or a physicist. And then in addition, you get someone outside of the division. So one of my students might have Nigel or Anne as their 4th reader. And I just love this, both when I'm in my thesis students' orals and I see them trying to explain mathematics to their Hume professor, for example, but also when I'm invited as a 4th reader. I just really enjoy this, like seeing what it means to do research in a completely different area of expertise. So I think that's one of the most exciting things about Reed.
Can I just underline it? I mean, I think thesis is really interesting, right? Because it's not just that you might get to do a thesis, right? Everybody does a thesis here. And this means that the curriculum has to be organized so that everybody's actually ready to do a thesis, right? That you're ready to do a thesis in your fourth year, right? So over time, you know, we will sort of help you develop ideas for thesis if you're not, if you don't already have one, or if one doesn't sort of come to you in the natural course of things. That's kind of how the curriculum is organized, right? It organizes with a certain amount of kind of fundamentals, and then moving towards more sort of research-shaped questions and more generating your own research, and then thesis. You're doing your own project, right? I think Angélica referred to the advisor as a mentor, right? We are sort of there mentoring you, but you're doing your thesis, right? And it's a really kind of exciting moment for you to kind of put all the bits that you've learned, all the skills you've got, all the sort of ideas that you've picked up along the way to use in the service of this larger project.
I'm curious if, and have you thought, so you and Nigel are part of the Hume 110 experience, and it's something that we haven't had the pleasure of having folks that have taught in Hume 110 for a long time in one of our sessions. This, like the thesis, is something that every student does here at Reed. Can you talk a bit about that, and what would be great in particular? Colleges often have sort of this introductory experience for students. What makes our Hume 110 program distinctive or unique, or what is that we think it does for students that is of particular impact, you know, beyond that particular class?
Oh, definitely. I think Hume 110 is a wonderful class for students to take, but I agree with you. It's a little different from what a lot of other programs have. The first thing that many other schools are jealous about is that we still have a common experience, which means that Hume has two major parts to it. One part is the lecture that all freshmen will watch the same lecture. We have it about between 8 to 10 times per semester. It's live in person, so it's in a lecture hall, and the rest of the time it's videotaped. But freshmen watch it together in groups, etc. So everyone watches the same lecture series, and that's Monday, Wednesday, Friday. There are lectures released, or I guess depends, they're released on video earlier than that. And then everyone will have a conference. And so a conference is going to be an individual seminar, usually 16 or 17 students, where you meet to talk about the content of the lecture, about the reading, about various ideas that you would have. So not many schools have both those components, which is why Hume also counts as a class and a half in your freshman year. So it's responsible for that. And then the thing that I think is truly, truly distinctive and is something that at least most of us, I think, on the staff would say, is after every paper, there are 7 papers in the freshman year. And after every paper, you meet individually with your professor to talk about the paper for about 20 minutes, half an hour. It's called a paper conference. And this initially is a little daunting, but ultimately students just love it. It becomes an opportunity to have an ongoing conversation for a year about writing, about how things are going, about what they want to work on, what they're experimenting with. And to my mind, that's one of the most unique aspects about Reed, and something I would pay money for if somebody was willing to meet with me after I wrote something. I would love it if they knew my writing and they knew what I was thinking about. So that's a really, I think, valuable opportunity for our students. It's also, I think for this generation, you all have gone through COVID, all kinds of things. It's harder to learn how to meet with faculty, how to know how to do office hours, all that kind of stuff. And it's a built-in expectation. You sign up, you come, you meet with us, and it helps you to get past that original kind of concern, which is completely makes total sense to me after what we've all been through, that it's kind of hard to get to know faculty. And this way, this is a faculty member you know. And as Angélica mentioned, then we end up often on people's senior thesis orals, because it's so fun 4 years later for us to see how you became the neuroscientist or whatever that you dreamt of being, even when you were a little first year and you were, worried about sentence structure. So I think those elements, I would put all of those together, combined to make it a great experience where you can ask any first year what they thought about this reading, and they will have an answer. And I think that's also a common experience and a great opportunity.
And maybe I can stress one thing there, because there's a lot that's unusual about this program, but it is a year long, right? So your freshman seminar is the same class for a full year, right? It's basically the same group of students with the same professor for both the fall and the spring. So these paper conferences go across the year, right? You write these 7 papers in sequence over the course of a year. And so there's a lot of growth there, right? There's a lot of room to kind of develop and experiment and try some different ways if something's not working. You know, as an instructor, you just get this sort of unparalleled knowledge of a student's writing. And it's really productive, right? It really works. And the other thing I'd say is, you know, all the people in the conference get to really sort of know each other. And that's really important because one of the things we try to do in conference is talk about some difficult things. You know, they're difficult things. You don't want to just talk about them in the middle of nowhere, right? You want to talk about them in a group that you know and that you feel comfortable with. And so, you know, having the full year class is really a very special opportunity for us as well as for you.
And one of the things
Can
that
I add something?
Oh, absolutely.
So one thing that I noticed from my perspective of being on the other side of campus is that students write very well by the time they get to senior year, for example. And comparing to students that I worked with at other places, I really think that our students write much better, and that part of that is Hume. And you might think that mathematical writing has nothing to do with the kind of writing that they're learning Hume, but just being able to construct sentences and to carry an idea throughout, it's important in any kind of technical writing that you might do, even not in the humanities. And I think our students write very well, and I think that a big part of that is Hume.
And one of the things we have shared with folks is the fact that Reed produces more PhDs per capita than any other school in the United States except for 3. And one of the reasons for that, and you mentioned paper conference, is also the emphasis on grades. And, I had one faculty member say, once you get the grade, that's sort of the end of the conversation. I know what I have, I can sort of move on with life, versus students who might want to know how they're doing, and that's a conversation with you. And so maybe if y'all can sort of talk about what the de-emphasis for grades does for a Reed student when that is not the end-all be-all. Because I think as a first-year student, it takes some getting used to, and by the time you're a sophomore, you can't think of it any other way.
I think it pushes all of us to have conversations about the quality of the work. I mean, this is kind of an obvious answer to your question, but I think it's really true. And obviously, people really lament. I think students lament it too. I know my kids. One of my kids is still in high school, and the others when they were in high school, they just hated this tiny little grade thing, everything on Canvas where it updates your grade and you get these daunting notifications and it's horrifying and you're like, oh my God, did my GPA go up today? There's none of that at Reed. And well, that might produce some anxiety for people, and understandably, there always are open hours to talk to your faculty members and to really have a discussion about how things are going. So I think it does force us all to really talk about the content of the work and to be really clear, or we try to be really clear about what needs to be done to improve the work, to make it better. We all can always make it better. And so it's less on a scale and more of how can it improve.
Yeah, I mean, it really puts the emphasis on improvement, right? And we can all improve, right? Even if you're writing spectacular, it can be more spectacular, right? And there's no point going to class if you're not going to get better. And one of the things that I think is so special about Reed is students here have this kind of appetite to just learn stuff, encounter more stuff, right? And I think we really work hard to sort of feed that and keep that spirit going. And to me, that's what, at the end of the day, is behind the number of students who want to be doing doctoral work, right? They're really interested in kind of pushing those boundaries of knowledge in learning more and seeing what learning more looks like. Like I say, we try to feed that. We've certainly got a curriculum that's structured that way, right, with Thesis and so on. But a lot of it comes from you all, right? I mean, you come in and you want to learn more. You don't just want a grade or a number. You want to get better.
Mm-hmm. So
yeah, I think I would just add that I really emphasize the learning, right? people are here to learn, and my conversations are about learning, and my conversations after an exam are about how do I actually do this, not just like I had this grade and I'm done, or I have this grade and I want an extra point and I'm coming to here to you to like get that extra point, right? I mean, in my exams I do give numerical grades because that's easier in a math exam, but I actually, I mean, I have like the equivalent of paper conferences with my students where like I actually meet one-on-one with my students who maybe didn't do so well, and we talk about not just like how to do the problems that they didn't do in the exam, but also we talk about like how the class is going, how we can maybe learn differently so that when we come to the exam we can actually like show what we've learned and things like that. So it really changes the tone of the conversation with students after like an exam or anything like that, and it's not about the point that you could get extra, but it really about like how can I learn better.
Mhm.
Can I add one thing though for the parent, if there's parents here and are worried?
You sure can.
We do have a system that if the grade is C- or lower, the students will get a notification at 4 weeks, 8 weeks in the semester. So we do have a system. So there are alerts set up if there is a problem, and that system does encourage the student then to meet with the faculty member as well as their advisor. And to talk about the fact that the grade is really unacceptably low. So we do have some safeguards in place in case there are parents who are worried that it's just a free-for-all. It's really not.
Mhm.
I mean, and we do give grades. We just have a different conversation about the grades. I think that's
Mhm.
what it is.
Mhm. So I know the answer to this question, so it's going to be two-part. One of our students are curious if you double major, if you major and minor, do you do multiple theses or do you weave them into one? And so I think just one person can answer that. My second question is, how do you advise students that have either multiple or divergent academic interests? What do you do with those conversations? How do you help their path of putting together courses while they're here?
I can answer the question about double majors and so on. So first of all, so if you actually double major, you do have to write 2 theses. You have to write a thesis for each of the majors that you get. But there's other things that you can do. So we actually have interdisciplinary majors, and some of these are established ones. So for example, mathematics and computer science has an established interdisciplinary major. And in that case, you do only 1 thesis, but you might get 2 advisors, 1 from each department. In other interdisciplinary programs, you might only get 1 advisor. You can also create your own interdisciplinary program. These are the ad hoc interdisciplinary majors. And these actually require a little bit more work from the student to meet with faculty from both departments and actually craft a program of study. So not just the thesis, but actually like what the whole major looks like. And you actually need both departments to sign on this. And I know, for example, like people who have done like biology and art as an interdisciplinary major. And in that case, again, you only do one thesis. Minors don't do any thesis. So it's only about majors that you do thesis. I think that answers everything, but if anyone else wants to check.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, so in terms of kind of divergent interests, right? One, lots of our students have multiple interests. And by that, I don't mean that they're, deciding between math and statistics, right? They're deciding between things in different divisions, often quite wildly different divisions, right? I think one of the nice things about, a liberal arts college curriculum is that you have to start pretty broad in your first year, right? So Humanities 110 is kind of prep for a whole bunch of majors. It's sort of, a good way to start in a lot of places. A lot of students will take, a year of science, a year of Hum 110, and a year of a social science or a language or maybe a bit of math or whatever it is. But between those, they are, covering a lot of bases, right? So when you have a student who comes in and says, I'm interested in doing Latin or physics or dance, it's not difficult. You can put together a program for at least the first 3 semesters that keeps all of those open. For just 2 of them, you can keep it open much longer. And this is even for the programs, if they're interested in sort of physics grad school as one of the options, right? you can still be doing all you need to go into physics grad school while keeping your other options open in case those are sort of what you want to do. So it's one, it's not that hard. Two, I think it's sort of the point of going to liberal arts college, right? You get to do a lot of stuff and sort of really kind of move around the curriculum and enjoy some different things.
Nigel, what the heck is GLAM?
Well, so when I first came to Reed, we were in a different department. It was called Classics. Classics is a sort of an old-fashioned term for Greek and Latin. It's always a sort of a slightly confusing term because classics refers to all sorts of things, right? There's like classic automobiles, there's classic novels, there's classic FM, you know, whatever it is, right? It's a term that isn't descriptive of the material. So at some point we decided we would call ourselves something that was more communicative. And GLAM stands for Greek, Latin, and Ancient Mediterranean Studies. So we teach Greek and Latin language, we teach Greek and Latin literature, we teach archaeology and history sort of more across the Mediterranean basin. So we have Near Eastern and Egyptological archaeology classes, Turkey as well. You know, we're pretty open to kind of what people want to do, right? Within our department, there are two main.
Do you see that as glamorous, though? I mean, that's the real question here.
I remember when your department introduced it on the faculty floor, everyone was glammed out. They had glitter and like it was a big deal.
We had a lot of purple going on, and my backdrop wouldn't work. I didn't have an advanced enough computer to get the thing on.
No.
But yes, I think it's you know, there's a certain sort of 70s quality there.
I'll take it. So, you know, now's a segment where I'm going to ask you all tricky questions, and then Angélica, I'm going to go first.
Oh, thank you.
I know, which is not what you want at all. So if Reed was, let's say, a mathematical theory or an equation, you know, one of your favorites, you know, if you had to draw an analogy, and it doesn't have to be too complex, it could be very simple, what would it be? And I'll give you some time to think about that.
Okay.
And I just thought people would be sort of interested to know that you and I actually have sort of a West Side Story, you know, back and forth history.
A rivalry, if you will.
I went to high school at Roosevelt, Minneapolis, and I went to high school at Central, right in St. Paul?
No, I went to Cretin-Derham Hall, actually.
Oh, Cretin-Derham Hall, okay.
Yeah.
Well,
let me just be honest, actually. I went to Derham Hall, and then they let the boys in.
Oh.
And then it merged as a different school. So I'm actually...
That's when they had the Cretin?
Yeah, that's when they added, it was Archbishop Cretin or something. That was his name.
Oh.
It's a tough name to live with.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
Well, then we went to college in the same town, but two different places.
Exactly.
In Northfield, Minnesota, Carleton, St. Olaf. I'll let y'all guess who went where. And now we're both here at Reed.
Well, no, I'll just give them a clue that the slogan at Carleton at games against St. Olaf was, "We've got beer."
Yes.
This is definitely past era, long time ago.
No, we get St. Olaf Lutherans there. So, and Angélica, hopefully I bought you enough time for you to think about your response.
Yeah, so there's something in math called category theory, and some people like to describe it as the mathematics of mathematics. So if you think that mathematics tries to abstract all of this different ideas that maybe like you use in physics and you use in biology and you use in sociology and so on, and like tries to like give them a common language, category theory tries to give a common language to the different areas of mathematics, algebra and topology and number theory and so on. But it is abstract in a way that can still be very concrete and very useful. And I think Reed is very much like that. Like we try to give our students like this abstract ideas, but at the same like we do it in a way that then the students can take them and then make them useful for whatever they want.
A+. I'm sorry. I should give you feedback instead. that was exceptional. So I will jump around. Nigel, you're next. I'm going to ask you what what piece of poetry or prose do you think best represents Reed?
Oh, I can do that.
But before I go there, I think this is kind of a fun question. I just need one or two people to ask this. Your teaching style, how you've taught since COVID, what you've adopted. You know, one of the things that we, I think, continue to challenge ourselves is every year how to do better, how to do things differently, and understanding that, you know, we all develop in this way. That's why we have the Center for Teaching and Learning, which is a faculty resource to help us, you know, teach better. So how have your teaching styles and approaches changed since COVID?
So one thing that not in every class, but in some classes I do differently, is that I teach in a flipped style. So what this means is that students are doing a little bit of reading and a little bit of watching a video lecture that I prepared, which I would have not done before COVID, but now I know how to do. It's like a 10-minute lecture, and students do that before coming to class. And when we are in the classroom together, what we do is work together through the problems. And this is like flipping the order in which we do things, but really thinking that the initial learning, maybe I don't need to be there for, but I need to be there when the students are encountering problems for the first time and really struggling with them. And then I'm there to help them out, and they're working together, so they're there to help each other out. As opposed to like a standard lecturing style where like I'm there lecturing and maybe I get some questions, but many students don't get to process the information during the lecture. So they don't get to have me answering questions when they're really struggling for the first time. And I was doing a little bit of this before COVID, but I think after COVID, really learning, for example, how to produce some video content in a way that was useful for students, that really allowed me to like do a bigger jump to like really creating these lectures that students interact with before coming to class. We're still having the same amount of face-to-face time as I had before, but I think it's a lot more useful because I am having this constant conversations with them, as opposed to just like standing in the front of the board and not really talking to them one-on-one.
Can I just add that I think regardless of how, you know, all these technology things, I agree with Angélica, but I think the one thing, and I think this fits with what Angélica was saying too, is everyone so appreciates being in the same space in a way that they never did before.
Yes.
And it's almost a kind of everybody, I mean, especially those of you who are, you know, would be incoming freshmen. I suppose you lost your freshman year of high school, right? That is what a tremendous loss. And so I think this ability to be in the same place has a kind of profundity to it that it never had before, where it's just this idea that, yeah, we've got more tools and those are all good, but I think we're all just really grateful to be in the same place. And some people wear masks if there's some, you know, if some people are concerned about that kind of thing. And I let students Zoom in if they're ill, so they have a computer where they can be participating or at least listening. But I do think that just that ability to all be in the same place is unparalleled now.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. Nigel, have you thought more about what
Yes.
poetry prose represents Reed? Or also curious.
Under the Roman Empire, there was a sort of vogue for kind of writing encyclopedias, right? And encyclopedias tend to correlate with empire, right? Because empires are in a sort of position to sort of collect stuff, right? So in many ways, encyclopedias are a slightly suspicious genre. But then in the Roman era, a lot of writers started writing kind of ironic encyclopedias, right? They would collect very bizarre information. So it wasn't just kind of, you know, covert ways of sort of recording how many taxpayers there are and how many people might rebel or whatever. And my favorite is there's one by a Greek writer under the Roman Empire, a man called Athenaeus, who actually was from Egypt. And his encyclopedia is called Wise People at Dinner. And it's basically this sort of conversation over many, many books about stuff. And they produce lists of things like, you know, poems about fish, different kinds of fish, right? It's really important they have different names. So then they talk about all the fish, right? And this always reminds me a lot about Reed students, right? Because on one level, it's this kind of massive sort of systematizing project, but it's done with irony and humor and just a kind of a love of the details, right? A love of the kind of the fact that things are there and they're interesting and they're amusing and they make you laugh and they make you think.
That is excellent. That's excellent. Thanks, Nigel. What do we give Nigel a thumbs up? Success. Can you all talk about this is sort of a broad question, but let me sort of put a I'm going to answer two of these just really quickly. So students can do research with faculty on particular issues that might happen with faculty research during the summer, sometimes research during the school year, occasionally off campus. And it's a conversation you will have right away, certainly with our Center for Life Beyond Reed, about how you might work within your field while here. There are support systems for international students, from student life to financial support. And the last question I thought I'd answer quickly is there a placement system based off of courses or other institutions? And so I'll let one of the faculty sort of answer that. Placement, can you, Angélica, maybe talk about math? And I think the other area people often ask about is foreign language.
Yeah, so in math, we have a placement system and it's not an exam. We actually have one-on-one conversations with students. And I mean, we just don't think that an exam can capture what a student knows. So maybe I should first say, like, if you have IB credit or AP credit, there's like specific instructions for how this gets converted. But anything beyond that, for example, like maybe you took calculus in high school, but it was not AP, but you think you know enough and you think you're okay skipping calculus, then you'll have a conversation with one of us ahead of registration, and we'll try to figure out the best place for you. And sometimes the conversation might be, well, you had a lot of calculus, but maybe it's been a while, or maybe you didn't cover these topics, and it might be a good idea for you to take calculus just to set you up for success in the future. But maybe we have that conversation and really think like, no, you know everything that we're going to teach you in the calculus class, so why don't you go ahead and take the next class in our sequence, which is in Introduction to Analysis. So we really try to be very mindful in these conversations to place students at the right place. And this is particularly important for classes that are not calculus, where like, well, maybe you went to community college and took a linear algebra class, but our linear algebra class is very different in the way that we teach it. So we really try to have this personalized conversations, all thinking about the benefit of the student. Like maybe you think that like we're holding you back, but maybe we're holding you back for success in the future.
I think the foreign language.
There's no advantage.
Go ahead.
There's no advantage in terms of your distribution requirements, right? You can't pass out of distribution requirements. So if you pass out of, say, or not pass out of, if you don't take Calc 1, and you still need to take 2 math classes if that's what you need to take, right? So the emphasis is on taking the ones that are right for you rather than kind of getting out of things, as it were.
I was just going to say the foreign languages are somewhat similar, but we do have exams. So we do have placement. Does Greek and Latin have a placement exam over the summer still?
Well, Latin is we have placement. Greek is like math. We just talk to people, but that's
okay.
about once a decade.
But yeah, well, with French and Spanish, Chinese, Russian, you can take a placement exam over the summer. But the one thing that I think is really crucial to realize at Reed in general, always, is that this is just that's an initial help to help us figure out where to place you, but it doesn't mean it's not written in stone. And that in every case, we're always happy to talk to students who are interested in studying foreign languages or studying any of these subjects. I think economics might have one placement exam as well. I can't remember all the fields that have placement exams, but there are exams. But at the same time, this, as we say all the time, this is Reed. We're willing to talk to you about things, and we're not, as Angélica said, I think really well, we're not trying to hold you back necessarily in any case. Sometimes, and my experience with math actually is they often are trying to encourage people to really take a challenging course and to take on what they're ready for. And I think usually we're just trying to hit that sweet spot. And so, yes, there are placements, but no, they are not absolutely written in stone.
I mean, oddly, for what it's worth, I would just say it sort of depends a little bit on what you want to do, right? So, you know, for example, with Latin, say, I mean, if you're thinking of going to grad school, it might well be worth taking longer over your Latin, right? Just really knowing it perfectly, rather than getting into the lit classes and doing a bit of that. But if all you want to do is just go in the lit classes and do a bit of that, that's great, right? I mean, so we try to think through what are your kind of goals here, right? How important is it if it's you know, ambiguous, say.
The next question I actually really like. You know, we have the GLAM 110 classes, we have the introductory math classes, things that faculty may teach in that have many students, but you certainly get to a point, particularly considering your area of interest, where you have developed a class based on your passion, something that you want to share out with students. And so we have a student who really wants to hear about each professor's classes, but maybe you could share that one class that you've thought about for a long time and it hits your sweet spot.
Well, I can talk about a class I'm teaching this semester that has been tremendously fun. So I don't know if it's the one class, but I'm teaching a class on monsters, the monstrous and the human in early modern French. And it's just a great group of students. And it's been really wonderful kind of just studying monsters. I don't do a lot of, or I haven't done a lot of the kind of thematic studies over the past, but it's great. Monsters are actually really super interesting. And we have thoroughly enjoyed talking about monsters. So, so that's been a fun class.
Clue us in on something about monsters. I'm so curious.
Well, the monsters we were talking about on yesterday were they were squirrel-like creatures that were also potentially pork products in Rabelais, and they were being attacked by a Lenten something or other, some other kind of monster, and then they were saved by a flying pig. And while you would think that this is not intellectual or academic, it actually was profoundly intellectual and academic. We were talking about category crisis and the question of what makes you human. What makes you a squirrel or a pork? What does it mean to have a rival god in the sky when there's a monk as one of the characters? So I think what we're doing is by going to really old texts where they had really weird senses of what's weird. It's been just wonderful to think about the categories we have in our own culture and society and how those really are not as fixed as we might think.
Wow. And even in just you sharing that, the story I'm telling myself is monsters are not always the bad guy.
No, absolutely not. I mean, well, certainly, I think these particular squirrel pork creatures were quite honorable, and and it was really interesting to think about them and how they just made an innocent mistake when they started attacking these other people. So, so they were initially viewed as monsters, and eventually, and you don't even want to use the word humanized. They were eventually, I don't know what, viewed as not a threat.
Well, I like that. And Halika, how about you?
So in our department, we have these topics classes. So like we have topics in geometry, topics in algebra, and so on. And like we get to teach them every now and then. And a few years ago, I taught topics in geometry, and you just get to like choose whatever you want to do with those classes. So I had been meaning to learn about polytopes. So polytopes are higher dimensional versions of polygons, so things that have flat faces. And I just really always wanted to learn about it, but I had never had a chance. I was like, okay, I'm going to teach myself this while I teach it to my students. And I think that the best way of learning something is by teaching it to someone else. So it was a very challenging class for me to teach because I was basically learning the material a couple of weeks ahead of my students. But I had a great group of students that like was pushing me to like give them harder and harder homework, and I learned a lot, they learned a lot, and it was just really, really fun to just go to learn something that I had been meaning to learn for the longest time.
Wow. Do you often do that?
Yeah, I mean, with this topics classes we do, I mean, like, because I just get to like choose a new topic. So when I'm teaching topology, for example, like it's the same class that I teach every time that I teach topology. I'm not learning anything new. Maybe I'm learning a new way of explaining something, or maybe when my students do projects, then I learn something new. But with the topics classes, I just get to teach a new class, and then I get to do it. Next semester, I'm going to be teaching topics in algebra, and I'm figuring out what topic in algebra I want to learn, and then I'll be teaching that.
That's great. Thank you, Angélica.
Can I say that the first math thesis I was on many years ago, I was really excited because I did a lot of math in school and so on, and then I opened the thing, and it was about creating a function to reduce a 13-dimensional object to a more manageable 11 dimensions, and I was like, oh. Oh. I don't even know what 11-dimensional object is. It was amazing. It was a student. It was back in the day, actually. It was a student in Latin he'd written an applet. Do you remember applets? A little program for kind of Latin flashcards for the class. And this was, 95 or whatever, right? I mean, so this was like totally cool. Let me see, my class. 3 years ago, I offered a Greek athletics class, which, Greek athletics class are not that unusual. They're usually history classes, though. And what I wanted to do was offer a literature class, right? A class in kind of reading the poems about Greek athletics. And they're very difficult poems. And I've taught it before to students who have Greek. So, there aren't many of those. It's sort of a small class, like, max 8 or 9, maybe. And this one, I thought, well, I want to do it in translation. And people at other schools were like, well, that's crazy. It's never going to work. And quite a lot was at stake for me because I've been trying to write a book to sort of do this, right? To say, look, you can do this. You can teach these classes. And so I did this, and there was the class was 20, 21 people, something like that. And the students, fantastic. They wrote such good papers. The discussions were great. It was so kind of affirming. And the final thing at the end of the term, for the first time, I had my students do a creative project. They had to write their own Pindaric ode, as it's called, for some sporting occasion. Reed students may tell you otherwise, but actually a whole bunch follow sport. And though some of it was esports, which I thought was a little different. But they wrote fantastic odes, and it was great.
I'll tell you, one of the reasons I wanted to ask that question is because I think it's important for everyone here to understand that you can't have fun within the academic program. You can have this, you can explore, and it just doesn't have to happen by accident. It happen with intention, with thoughtfulness, with design, and I think you've all really illustrated this. So I have three final questions. Angélica, yours is going to be really quick. Are there math competitions for students? What do students do outside of the classroom with math?
So we do participate. So there's a US-wide math competition called the Putnam Exam, and we participate in that. We usually have some training sessions for that ahead of it, run by a faculty member. And if anyone has done math competitions, they may have heard of the Putnam Exam, but if not, it's sort of like a full day exam with questions where you actually have to prove something, and it's very similar to like math Olympiads if you ever did that in high school. But other than that, we have a student group that organizes a student colloquium. And so in the student colloquium, students present kind of like maybe like the fun math that they've been reading about, or maybe the seniors might actually have an opportunity to talk a little bit about their thesis, or maybe your summer research or something like that. And then in addition, we actually have a grown-up colloquium, which is open to students, where we invite researchers. This is a weekly thing. We invite researchers that maybe we know, like maybe our collaborators, or maybe that are like somewhere close by, to give talks about their research, but aimed to undergraduate students. And I think that's like, it's really hard to do as a researcher in mathematics to do this, but the people that we invite like usually do fantastic job of really kind of like, even if you cannot get to like the actual theorem or maybe a proof of their theorem, they can at least like frame the questions that they've been trying to answer. And our students really, really enjoy that, to sort of see that mathematics is a lot more than what you do in the classroom, and that it has all other uses.
Mhm. Thank you very much. And my second last question is for you. You probably thought you were going to get off easy.
I did. I was hoping.
So I had that seed in the back of my head. If Reed were a piece of literature that you really loved, any language, what would it be?
Oh, you just teed that up because I always answer this question the same way. It would be Don Quixote. Thank you for asking me one. Don Quixote is the text that embodies all of us, or that we all aspire to embody. Someone who just gets so excited about reading something or learning about something that they want to live it. And so that's 100%. I think we all should be reading Don Quixote daily. But also, I think it totally embodies Reed, where it's a bunch of people who are so excited about things that they really want to live their excitement. They want to live their passion for whatever it is they're studying, but that there's some silliness along the way too, and that we all might have, cardboard helmets and whatnot, so that, we fall down occasionally. But we aspire to all kind of embody this intellectual ideal.
Is that your favorite book?
It is my favorite book.
Yeah. I love it when you talk about it, you light up.
I know. Well, that's what I'm like. Thank you for the easy one. I'll find a way to fit it into every conversation.
So for each of you, we have students here, and they're coming from different experiences. And I think oftentimes people are trying to figure out what is this thing that is Reed, right? Because we make decisions based on the distinctive qualities, because we're choosing this rather than that. And so I'm just wondering, and just one sentence for each of you, maybe two sentences, what is this sort of if you had to capture, and I won't say the essence of Reed, but an essence of Reed, can you share to our guest what that is?
All right, I mean, the easy thing to say is thesis, but more generally, just kind of students taking responsibility for their learning, right? Students are in it with you. It's an amazing thing. Classroom's not one of these things where you go in and just sort of try to drag people along. You go in and you just sort of do it together. And some days you come out and it's just so exciting. Your temperature's higher, and just like, class is just so joyful.
Love that.
To add to that, I would say, we aspire to a collaborative learning environment that doesn't always work, but when it does work, it's absolutely amazing, and it allows you to do things, I think, that you haven't imagined, but we haven't imagined either. So it allows us to produce things collectively in a way that I think we could not do individually.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking along the same lines when you first asked the question, like this idea of like learning for learning's sake, right? And like having this intellectual curiosity and thirst of just wanting to know more, and not just kind of like doing things because you have to, but because you just want to learn.
Mm-hmm. One of the things, and I hate to end with what sounds like sort of numerical information, because that was qualitative and compelling. We don't take part in the rankings, but we talk about Princeton Review because it's literally just people voting about their experience at college. And it's really clear when I have a chance to talk to you all about this, why people say that Reed has the best classroom experience in the nation. And I think that's all because of y'all and what you do and what you've created, and the enthusiasm for what happens in the classroom is contagious. But I think it also signals to our students, if this is something you're excited about, this is a place where you can do it really, really well. So I want to thank you for expressing something that you're expressing firsthand. I can only do, secondhand. And I value all of you, and it makes me proud to be a part of this community. And I want to thank all of our guests who are here. You've gotten a message from us probably today that shows the listing of every academic department and when you can go online and find out about that program in specific. In many cases, as many as possible, our faculty are going to be joined by current Reed students. And so these won't be sessions of 20 people. Some will be very intimate, like 10 folks. But it really is designed to get some of your academic heavy lifting questions answered for each majoring program. In addition to that, Carnell, our Vice President of Student Life, and I are going to answer tough questions. Audrey's going to join me, Nigel, and Kathy, who is our Dean of Faculty, and Nigel's our former Dean of Faculty, will do a deep dive on the academic program. All of the stuff is designed for you to make an informed decision about where you want to be for 4 years, including many on-campus programs. So whatever you need, we're going to provide it for you. All right. So I hope to see you soon. Check out the things that are going to be meaningful for you. And again, I want to thank our guests for joining me for this hour.